So, about a year ago, actually, it was June 19th, 2018, when I posted that attenuation paper up online, and discovered some really interesting things about the attenuation system. And as far as I can tell, it's largely unchanged since then. Let me see if I can switch this up a little bit. Here we go. So, what I want to do today is, in this paper, I allude to some potential changes. I even say it right here. Finally, I use my model to explore alternative ways of applying attenuation and make some recommendations on how the system can be improved from its current state. And mainly what I'm interested in fixing is the fact that once you get high enough level in this game, you can earn your hourly allotment of experience very quickly. And then you're kind of left, well, what do I do now, right? If your goal is to grind. And, of course you can always keep grinding and keep getting gear, but, a lot of players who play games like this want to be able to feel like they can continue to progress. And they don't, I think it was an unintended consequence. I'm not 100% sure, because I didn't, design the system, but I think that this idea of forced breaks was an unintended consequence. Because when you look at the math of how the attenuation system was designed, it was clear that it wasn't, they didn't call it experience cap system, right? They didn't design it as a cap. They designed it so that once you hit a certain point, it decays, but it doesn't quite go away. The problem that I found when I dug into the math more deeply, though, is that the choice of the way that they chose for that to decay is that it basically happens very, very quickly. The decay of experience happens very, very quickly, so you end up running into an effective hard cap on your experience. And I don't think that was intended with the math. So I've been looking at how to, I've been thinking a lot about how to design a system that really keeps the idea of attenuation in place so that it helps to bridge the gap between hardcore players and casuals. Now, the soft cap in the skill raising system, how skills take exponentially larger amount of experience to gain, versus every level basically gives you the same amount of bonus that the previous level does, but it costs a bunch more experience to get that bonus. That already kind of introduces a limitation in how runaway you can go in power, which helps. So no matter how much experience you have, the fact that the curve of power bends over and it takes much more experience to get the same amount of power that it did before makes it so that you're already kind of putting casuals and hardcore players in a state where they can play together, and the more casual players can still feel like they're contributing to the group. The attenuation system is also meant to be I think another cog in that. So let's see here. So what I want to do is, at first I want to point out that once I found this equation, which I write right here, I didn't find it. I was in a guild actually. And let me just give you a little bit of background about myself. First of all, I love Lord British games. My very first video game was Ultima 5 for the Apple IIe, and this is a story I'm sure Lord British hears over and over again and probably can't ever get enough of hearing. But it really inspired me not only to think about morality because of all the philosophical undertones to the game, even with the incredible limitation of technology in that day, but it also really got me into video games, which is a hobby that I just passionately love. And actually, for the first part of my life, I really wanted to make video games, so I studied programming like crazy. It's down in the link. You can find the link to my paper down in the comments here, or below the stream. There should be a line that says you can find a link to the paper here. And if you can't find that, let me know, and I'll post it in the chat there. So anyway, I got really into programming, and through studying video games, I discovered science, which is my main thing nowadays, and fell in love with science because physics is useful for making video games realistic. And so I started studying physics, and then just kind of went crazy with physics, and that's where I am today. So, you know, Lord British Games really inspired me a lot of different ways back in the day. And watching this project has been really inspirational as well. All these people contributing, like being able to contribute to this, and how much the community has done for this project, and also getting to see the inner workings of designing a video game. It's just been such a treat. So I've been following ever since Kickstarter. And I've always been looking for ways to you know, can I use my skill set to do anything to contribute to this? And my skill set happens to be math. So, math and science, right? So when I was in a guild with a developer named Core back last year, he let me know this equation one day. He was talking about it in guild chat, and I was like, and I asked him how is it's done, and he showed me the actual equation that is used to attenuate experience. And from that one piece of information, I developed a model and started studying the how the system would work, and came up with all these results and wrote this whole paper. And it took me about 70 hours worth of work, and I did it over 5 days. So Core told me on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday is when I published or posted my paper on the site, on the forums. So I don't know that we're going to... And then, of course, I reformatted my computer about 6 months later and forgot to back up my model. So my model's gone. So I got to redo the model from scratch. However, it's only like 1 page of code. It's really not that hard to do this from a programming perspective. So that's so the first thing we're going to do is kind of... and I need to do this, is I want to remember how the experience currently works, attenuation currently works. I want to rewrite the model so that I can reproduce the results that we have in this paper, and then I want to design the tweak and come up with a different basically just coming up with a different equation for how this actual experience gained versus like the base experience and the amount of experience you've earned in the last hour, right? How this relationship is formed. And I believe that just by changing this relationship, we can eliminate the force break. So here's what we want to do. Let's go over here. There we go. What was I doing here? Oh, I was tutoring somebody. Okay, let's get rid of this crap. Blink. Alright, so what's our goals today? So 1, we want to remember two, we want to design our tweak. And let's put a couple of constraints on this tweak. Okay, so 1 is we want to remove the forced breaks. But leave the spirit of the system intact. 2, we want to make sure that, you know, let's face it, the dev team isn't that big anymore, and they've got a lot on their plate, and they're really focusing on bringing new players in, and yada, yada, yada. It just doesn't a lot of time. So we want to make this easy to implement. And 3, we need to, well, I think that's it. We might add to this if we think of anything else. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to communicate our findings. So this probably means writing another paper similar to the one that was written, but probably much shorter, because we're going to build on top of what came before. However, I might just do a forum post instead of doing a formal paper. It just depends on how much we have to fit into it. So instead of putting like this huge long post, I might condense it to a shorter paper. So that's basically what we're doing here today. And I might not get done with all this today because, like I said, it took me 70 hours to do the original work. But building on top of that work shouldn't be nearly as difficult. All right, so let's start with this equation. How does experience attenuation currently work? So let's define a couple terms. I'm going to say E is the experience. Well, we don't want to use E. Yeah, we can use E. Experience gained. And we'll say B is the base experience for mob. So every mob that you kill is worth a certain amount of experience, and as a base amount. And that base amount is what you would get if you didn't have any attenuation kick it in. So that's what the B is. The E is the actual experience that's gained. Okay, the actual amount of experience that we've gained in the when we kill the mob, after the attenuation is taken into account. I'm going to say big A is the actually I just remembered my paper has a notation, but let's just leave it like this. Okay, so big A is is the amount of EXP gained in the last, sorry, my handwriting sucks so bad, hour. All right, so if this is the case, then we can write down the equation using these symbols for as is. So attenuation as is. This is E is equal to our base experience amount. Now I got to open my paper. Yeah. So it's the base experience amount to the power of 2 times 10 to the 6 minus A. And this is if, I should really, this is if A is greater than 10 to the 6th. Now, what do I mean by 10 to the 6th, right? So 10 to the 6th power is 10 times 10 times 10, 6 times. And when you calculate that out, that's equal to 1,000,000. So 10 to the 6th is 1,000,000. So I'm saying if the amount of experience we've gained in the last hour is greater than 1,000,000, then the experience you earn for the mob is equal to this attenuated equation. 2 times 10 to the 6, if 10 to the 6 is a million, then 2 times 10 to the 6 is 2 million. So we take 2 million and we subtract the rate, or the amount of experience we've earned in the last hour, which remember is over a million. And by the way, we need to divide this by a million. To get the right equation. So that's our result. And then if it's less, and then we'll say down here, we'll say like if A is less than 10 to the 6, or equal, we can put, then E is just equal to B, our base amount. So in other words, we're unattenuated if we have earned less than a million experience in the last hour. And then we'll put like, this should be like else if this is like pseudo code, right? So we'll make this else if A is that, and then we'll just say else E equals 0. So in other words, if we've somehow managed to earn, none of these are true. If neither of these two are true, right, then we've somehow managed to earn more than 2 million in the last hour, and then we just cap, like, no, you don't get any more experience for killing any mobs. Now, the first thing I want to do here is I want to kind of clean up this equation because it's a little ugly. So I want to focus on this exponent here, and I want to remember from algebra, there's a property from algebra that says if you take like two numbers and add them together and then divide by a third number, well, that's equal to taking the first number and dividing by the third number and adding to it the second number divided by the third number. So you might remember that if you remember some of your basic algebra. And so we can simplify this by writing it as b to the 2 times 10 to the 6 divided by 10 to the 6 minus big A over 10 to the 6. And here, the 10 to, if I multiply 2 by a million and then divide it by a million, I'm going to get 2. Because the millions cancel in that case. So this number is just 2. And I'm going to redefine this symbol. I'm going to define a little a is our big A divided by 10 to the 6. So little a is just the total amount of experience that you've earned in the last hour divided by a million. So if little a is less than 1, then you've earned less than a million experience in the last hour. If little a is bigger than 1, then you've earned more than a million experience in the last hour. Okay? So we can write this then as E is equal to B to the 2 minus little a. See how much cleaner that is? So that's what we're going to work with. Now, let's plot that and see what that looks like, so that we can get an idea as to how the experience is attenuated. And remember, this is how it currently works. So what I want to do here is I want to say we're going to let A, which is our experience that we've earned in the last hour divided by a million, we're going to let that range from 1 to 2, and we're going to take steps of 0.01. So A is a bunch of values. Ugh, look at all, I should have suppressed that output. But if we look at what this is, right? The first value of A is 1, then 1.01, then 1.02, then 1.03, because I want to kind of get an idea as to what my attenuated experience will be as a function of how much experience I've earned in the last hour. Now, my base experience, we're just going to choose a flat number of 1,000 for that. Okay? So that's just we killed a mob that if you're unattenuated, you would get 1,000 experience for it. So I want to calculate E is equal to, based off of our equation now, it's going to be B to the power, and I need to use the little dot here, to the power of 2 minus A. Now, if I plot A versus E, what you can see here is that this is what our attenuation looks like. So if you've earned exactly 1 million, and let me make this scale a little better to read here. So if you've earned 1 million experience exactly in the last hour, and you kill a mob that's worth 1,000 experience, then the amount of experience you'll receive is 1,000 still, because you're technically unattenuated at that point. But if you've earned 1.2 million experience in the last hour, and you kill a mob that's worth 1,000 experience, well, then you're gonna, let's see if we can actually look at that plot. Look at that point. Well, I can't get it exact. I could. We can zoom in on it, but you can see that it's worth a little over 200, right? It's worth a little over 200 experience for that same mob that would normally be worth 1,000. So by the time you go from 1 million experience to 1.2 million experience in the last hour, then the rate at which you're earning experience is basically a fifth of what it normally would be. And you can see by the time you get to 1.3, you're down to about 10%. And this is why experience gains basically cap at 1.3 million an hour. Because it's taking you time to kill these mobs. And this A, right, is only considering the amount of experience you've earned in the last hour. So it's forgetting about things you've killed. And eventually, where'd my plot go? And so here, you're just not earning enough experience to combat how much you're forgetting about having lost. And so you're kind of hitting like an equilibrium there. And it's really hard to push your experience past 1.3 million an hour. Okay? So this is how the current attenuation equation looks like when you plot it. Now, what am I proposing to change this with? Well, the first thing I propose to change this with is just simply making it a straight line that connects these 2 points. Oops. Yeah. So basically imagine a line that just goes straight down from this point to this point. And so we can do that actually. So let's see. Y equals mx plus b. Let me grab a piece of paper. So m is going to be y2 minus y1. So it's going to be negative 1,000 divided by x2 minus x1, which is just 1 in this case because of our units. So m is negative 1,000. And then b, so that's our slope. Let's actually, instead of calling that m, let's call that our slope. And our intercept is going to be 1,000. No, it's 2,000. Because I forgot our plot starts at 1. So if I plot this, so then I'll just say E new equals it's a little funky the way I'm doing this, but m times a plus b. Let's see if that works. Oops. intercept and slope. So hold on plot E new A E new, and we'll put this in red. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so this is basically what I found in my paper is, see how curved this guy is? It means that the amount of experience that you're gaining, or that you're attenuating, the amount of experience that you're gaining when you kill the mob is changing very rapidly in this region. And then once you get past this midpoint, it starts to change very slowly in this region. So in calculus, we have a word for that. It's called concavity. Concavity is how quickly the rate of change of your curve is changing. So I'm changing very quickly here, and as I move here, I'm changing less and less and less until I'm barely changing at all over here. So the rate at which I'm changing itself is changing as I move along here. And that's called concavity. Whereas the line has a constant rate of change all along the entire region. The rate at which the gain is changing is the exact same here as it is over here, and it never changes as you move, as the amount of experience you've gained in the last hour changes. So the line has zero concavity. The actual way that we're changing in Shroud has a lot of concavity. And what I found in my paper, one of the key results, is that the more concavity you have in this equation, the more forced breaks you're going to introduce into the system. In other words, the more you're going to be able to front load your EXP for the hour and then take a break and catch up to somebody who's been EXPing around the whole time. And the paper goes into great detail about this, so I'm not going to reproduce all those results, or I'm not going to redo all those results here. But that's the main thing. Yes, absolutely, gravity. And the paper does have some things where I show that. And that's right. Before this one, either system, so let's do that, actually. Do I want to do that? Yeah, so before this one, from 0 to 1, that's when you're earning your first million experience. And what you'll find is that the baseline is just completely flat in both cases at 1,000, because every time you kill a mob, you get 1,000 experience, because you're not attenuated at all. And what I found, let me get another one here, is that you can make, if you extend this range, instead of starting the attenuation at 1, if you start it at 0 and let it go to 3 million, you're going to end up with an even less sloped curve. And it's this slope that the less you can make that slope, the more gradually you introduce the attenuation. And the more gradually you introduce the attenuation, the faster your rate of experience gain reaches equilibrium. Paper goes into that at great detail as well. So let's go ahead and put the actual curve that I'm recommending we use. So to do that, let's see. I need a piece of paper. Actually, I have it in the paper. I have it in the paper here. So I'm going to say M is going to be our multiplier, and it's a function of A, the amount of experience that we've gained. And so if I write -1/3 times A. I want to redefine A for this, because A currently goes from 1 to 2. So I want A to go from 0 to 3 here, and still go in those steps. And then now we're going to let our multiplier, which is a function of A, be negative 1 over 3. Oh man, I just saw a typo in my paper. Isn't that always the case? Plus 1. And then I'm going to say... Oh, why did I put X? It should be A. And then I'm going to say E newer is equal to M times the base. So I'm changing the equation to just be a constant times your base amount, and that constant should be something between 0 and 1. So that at most it can give you the base amount. And let's plot this. E newer, and we've used red and blue, let's make it black. Okay, so see, this is the region. Now we're going from 0 to 3 instead of from 1 to 2, so our results have been smushed, right? This is the plot that we were just looking from 1 to 2. And I really like this plot because it shows you once again just how steep this dang curve is. That the blue, remember, is the current. Let's actually put a legend in here. So let's see, our first one is current. Our second one is linear. And then our third one we'll call linear long, because it's longer. It affects over a longer range. Oh, it thinks that. I get it. I get what it did. Okay, there we go. All right, so as you can see, the linear longer meets at the same point that the linear one did, at the halfway point between 1 and 2 million. But you're not fully attenuated. Like here, you were fully attenuated at 2 million under the old system and under the regular linear one. And the results for these are written up in the paper, for all three of these, actually. And so what you can see is by stretching this linear portion to cover a larger range of experience gain, you can greatly reduce the slope of it, and reducing the slope is key to reaching equilibrium faster, i.e. getting rid of these forced breaks, making it so that it's impossible for someone who's taking a break to catch up with someone who is leveling continuously. Even though, if you're leveling continuously, you're going to be attenuated. That's the goal, right? Because we still want to leave the attenuation system intact. But what this means, like you were saying before, Gravity, the red and the blue curves should be flat at 1,000 here in this range, and then they drop off, right? But the system that I'm recommending drops off immediately. So after you kill that first mob, you already started getting attenuated. And that means if you're earning less than 1 million experience an hour, i.e. you're a newer player, you're going to get less experience under this new system than you are currently. That's a problem. And we need to address that problem. And I think the way to address it is to look at, okay, where is the point where it's going to impact you the most, where you're going to be most negatively impacted by this earlier introduction of attenuation. And what I found is that point is maximized. I allude to it at the end of the paper. This final plot here is really good for this. Let's see if I can blow this up even more. I don't know that I can. Yeah. This plot right here, the equilibrium rate of EXP gain versus the base rate of gain for both the original and linear longer cutoff functions. So the original function is blue, and as you can see, your base rate is equal to your equilibrium rate originally until you hit 1 million of base rate gain per hour, and only then does your rate start. So if you remember your equilibrium rate, oh my gosh, this is getting involved, but your actual rate fluctuates like crazy. See these plots? This is the actual rate of experience you're gaining. This is what I'm calling little a in the work we're doing, and it's basically how much experience you've earned in the last hour. And that fluctuates like crazy over time until it reaches some equilibrium. But under the current system, you can see that the equilibrium isn't reached until you're like, 2,000 minutes. It's on the order of a day or even longer. And that's just unreasonable. Nobody's going to experience gain for continuously for a whole day. And so what we want is we want this equilibrium rate to be reached much earlier. But regardless, I'm plotting that equilibrium rate down here to get kind of an idea as to the comparison in the two. And so you can see that under the current system, because it only kicks on after 1 million experience, you end up with this kink in this plot. And these two are equal to each other before that. Because if you're earning less than 1 million experience an hour, then once you reach, then it's always looking back at how much you've earned, and that's going to be equal to your base rate always, because your base rate isn't getting attenuated, and these two are equal until you hit 1 million, and then it curves over. And then my linear longer equilibrium rate versus base rate immediately starts getting attenuated. Right? It immediately starts getting attenuated. And so that means up until this point where they cross, if you're earning less than 1.5 million experience an hour under the new system, you're going to get less experience than you do currently. And if you're earning more than 1.5 million experience an hour under the new system, you're going to get more experience than you are currently, even though it's still getting attenuated. So if they just implemented that change as is, it would really favor higher end players. But it can be easily fixed by looking at where is the biggest discrepancy occurring, and you can see that the biggest difference between these curves occurs at 1 million experience. And so what we're going to do to ameliorate that is figure out what the difference in this experience is, and then recommend that all like a percentage difference. Maybe it's like 1.5 times or something like that. And then we'll recommend that all mobs get a boost to their base EXP of 1.5 times. And that'll make it so that under the new... So now, if you're killing the same mobs as you were before, their base experience is worth more. And if you were right at 1 million experience an hour before, you'll be right at 1 million experience an hour after. And anyone who's less than that will be getting more than they would have before, and anyone who's greater than that will be getting more than they would have before. Right? So that's going to be our goal. I'm a little scatterbrained here. I'm kind of jumping ahead with that, but that's something I want to point out, because when you look at this plot and you look at what I'm recommending, it's like, oh my gosh, you're getting attenuated before you've even reached 1 million experience. Okay. So let's do this. Now, if I go back to the paper and I look at how I designed my model, model is based on following idea of how attenuation works. A player's actual EXP experience rate per hour, I call it delta A, is first defined as all the experience that said player earned in the previous hour of play. Right? Keep in mind, this is very different than your average rate of gain, right? Which your average rate is the total amount of experience you've gained divided by the total amount of time you've been leveling. This is different. This is just looking back an hour, saying how much have you gained in that last hour. At the time when new experience is awarded, the player's actual experience rate is first calculated. So in other words, first we calculate. Before we award experience, you kill a mob, the first thing you do is calculate how much has the player earned in the last hour. If this exceeds 1 million per hour, then the amount of experience awarded is attenuated according to this formula that we've been discussing. With the experience actual and experience base being the actual and base experience for dispatching the mob respectively, and where delta A has units of 1 million experience per hour. So that means it's going to range between 1 and 2. If delta A is greater than 2, so you've been earning more than 2 million experience per hour, then you just put a hard cap of 0 for the experience. So the model takes as input the base experience rate per hour. So when I do this model, I'm going to switch over to my notation in the paper. Let's go ahead and start a new script here, and we'll save it. We'll call this function soda exp attenuation. And it's going to take in delta B, which is our base experience rate per hour. So in other words, delta B is if you were not attenuated, how much experience would you be receiving an hour? So you just take however many mobs you're killing per hour and you add up how much experience are you getting per mob, and you multiply those two together, and that's your delta B, the total amount you would be getting every hour if you were not attenuated. So I assume that the player is killing mobs at a steady rate with the same time interval between the mobs. That's just a working assumption for the model. Of course, it doesn't really work that way, but the smaller time rate you make this, the closer it approximates what you're getting. Another input is the number of mobs killed per hour, here referred to as the frequency nu. So I'm going to put nu, NU. That's going to be our, these are Greek letters, by the way, nu and delta, right? So nu is typically used for frequency in physics. So nu is the number of mobs that we're killing every hour. The base experience per mob is simply the total amount of experience you earn per hour, if you were not attenuated, divided by the number of mobs you're killing. So I can come down here and say, okay, let's end this guy. And before we get too far along, let's save this. I'm going to actually save this on my Google Drive so I don't... Soda optimization. There's the attunement optimizer. So soda attenuation. And before I save that, yeah, I called it attenuation. Good. Because I always get attunement and attenuation mixed up in my head. Like the words. So drive... my code, soda attenuation. Let's save that there. All right, so we want to say what's our base exp. E sub base is equal to delta B divided by nu, our frequency. So I'm going to put a little documentation in this. Delta B unattenuated rate of exp per hour. Nu is the number of mobs killed each hour. E sub B is the unattenuated exp per mob kill. We may use that, we may not, I'm not sure. I also added a couple of inputs to study players taking breaks after getting attenuated. There is an input for the number of minutes spent gaining experience, and another input for the number of minutes spent resting between farming. So let's call that T on, which is what I used in the paper, and that's for the number of minutes you're spending experiencing, versus T off, the number of minutes you're taking a break for. And actually, I can get T off just from T on, because the break should always be the time you spend on break plus the time you spend leveling should always add up to 1 hour. So I'm always going to assume that. So I'll put that right here. Assume time on break plus time spent EXP equals 60 minutes. Right? And since we're taking T on in minutes, we can say T off equals 60 minus T on. All right. Look at that. We got 2 lines of code in our model. We're flying along. Guys, I got to go run to the restroom here real quick, but I will be right back. So let me get Mimner up here and put some light on. Dance away. Oh, let's see. Magic. And I got to use the restroom, but I will be right back, and we'll keep crunching. We're gonna knock out a lot of this model today. So just hang out, okay? Alright, and I'm back, and I think I just realized you guys can't see me, and I don't know why. Hey, there we go. That's better. Okay. So, back to the task at hand. Now, a constant we're going to need, which I don't necessarily want to make an input because I really want this to be the same across every time we run the model, is we want the total time EXPing. Total time. We'll just call it total time. This is the total amount of time we spend leveling. In hours. So we're gonna start with 24. So we're gonna assume we're level for an entire day, which is absolutely ridiculous. Although I'm sure there's people that have done it. Maybe not continuously like we're assuming here though. And the reason is because the old version, takes a really long time to reach, or the current implementation of attenuation takes a really long time to reach equilibrium as far as how much EXP you're earning per hour. And we're going to see it's probably going to even require more hours than this. All right. Let's see if we can get any more guidance from the paper here. I assume the player has not earned any experience for at least an hour before starting. So in other words, you're completely fresh. I loop over new time steps per hour. This is the number of time. So basically, new is the number of times you're killing per hour. So that's the next thing we need to calculate is our time step. This is i.e. in other words, this is the amount of time in between kills. So I'll just call this TS for time step. And what's that going to be? It's going to just be 1 divided by new. Right? So, and that's going to be hours. Just wondering, do we want to work in hours ultimately? We might want to convert because we've got minutes here, right? So why don't we work in minutes? So total time equals total time. That's however many, it's already in hours, and there's 60 minutes in an hour, so we just multiply this by 60. And what else needs to be converted? Time step equals time step times 60. Yeah, so I think that's going to be okay. There's going to be a lot of bumps along the road here until we get this totally working. So the next thing that we need to calculate, or we need, is some way to keep track of, well, how much experience have you earned in the last hour, right? And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to make an array of numbers. And that array of numbers is going to, the size of that array is going to be, it's going to basically have an element in that array for every kill that you can fit into an hour. So how many kills per hour do we have here? How many kills do we have per hour? Well, we kill... It's just new, right? New is the number of mobs killed each hour, so we don't need a new bucket for this. This is already good. So if we know how many kills we have per hour, then we need an array that is the size of new to keep track of how much experience. So I'm going to say exp last hour equals zeros. This is just a way to create an array that all the elements are 0 in it. Zeros, and we're going to put in here of length new. 0, that'll give me a square matrix. Row, column, row, column. So it'll give me a column of numbers. It's all 0 to begin with. And I don't want to call this. I want to call this... This isn't the EXP we've learned in the last hour. It's our hourly EXP array. The EXP we've learned in the last hour will be the sum of all these entries. And it starts out as 0, so the sum, as every element being 0, so the sum of all the entries will be 0. And then every time we basically kill a mob, we're going to calculate how much EXP we earn from that mob, and then we're going to update this array for that entry. And then when we want to calculate our total amount of our EXP earned in the last hour, we're just going to add all the things to that. Or all those together. Now, we also want an array to keep track of the total EXP earned, period. Now, how big this needs to be is going to be however many times we're going to step through our loop, which we can get from our total time. So our total time in minutes is, I think we want to use total time. So we have mobs killed per hour. We're going to need one element in this for every time we get a mob killed. Because every time we get a mob killed, it's going to add to the whatever we earned to the previous element. That'll be the new thing. This will be our total EXP gained versus time. Total EXP versus time. So you can see how, like, you know, it takes time to write this, even though it's code-wise. Once we get to the end of this, it's only going to be, you know, 50 lines at most. But you got to really think about what you're doing. So our total EXP versus time. How many elements that we're still going to make that as zeros? Only one column because it just needs to be an array, not a matrix. And how many elements are going to be in there? It's going to be new mobs per hour times total time, which is the number of hours we level. That's how many times we're going to gain experience over this entire, in this case, 24-hour period. But if we change this number, then it will accommodate accordingly. So that's the total number of times we're going to gain experience over the entirety of leveling. And then finally, we're going to need an array of time values that we can plot like our total EXP versus time against. And this one we can pre-calculate. We don't even need to use the array. So it's going to be well, we'll calculate it every time in the array. So how many elements are going to be here? So we're going to have it's the same number of elements, right? We'll just call this total time. And that's going to be zeros, 1, comma, a same number of elements. Should probably come. Now I'm using this same equation twice, so I should have a expression for it, but. Where did we calculate time steps? Total number of time steps for the duration of our EXP, our leveling. This is going to be num time steps equals new times total time. The number of time steps per hour times the number of hours that we level. And then we can replace this here and here. So now if we change that, we only have to change it in one place and it'll propagate through all of our code. And I think I want to make this both +1. So that we always start at 0. 0 time is 0 experience. And then finally we're going to need time, an index, to tell us which element of the time array we are calculating. Now our index is going to be, this is what we call this time index, is equal to 1. We have to start our indices in MATLAB start at 1 for an array, unlike most computer languages, which start at 0. Okay. So I think, so now we're going to say while, we're going to enter our loop. So while, let's see, how do we do a while loop in MATLAB? While expression statements end, while end, okay. So we're going to say while our time index is less than num time steps +1. And then we'll end there. So here we're going to loop over all of our mob kills. Okay, so now we're starting the meat of the program. We kind of got some stuff set up. We might need to add some more stuff to it. But basically, every time we go through this loop, we're going to act as if we just killed a mob. It's worth our base EXP amount, right? E sub B. And we're going to calculate what the new experience, the attenuated experience should be. And then we're going to update all of our data structures to keep track of that. So let's do it. All right, so the first thing we need to do is calculate delta A. So remember, delta B is our base experience gain, and it enters right through here telling us how much EXP we get per mob killed. So delta B is how much experience you would gain in the hour, or in hour, if you were not attenuated. Delta A is going to be your actual gain for the last hour. The actual amount of experience you've gained in the last hour. And so delta A is going to equal, and now how do I sum all the elements of an array in MATLAB? It's pretty easy. Sum A. Yep. So we'll just say delta A is the sum of our hourly EXP array. All the elements in the hourly EXP array. We're also going to need, this is a time index. We're going to need an hourly index. And that, every time we get to an hour, it has to go back to the beginning, right? So it's going to go from 1 to new, and then if it's ever made bigger than new, it'll be reset back to 1. So an index to keep track of where we are in our hourly array. And this is really key because it's going to start at 1 as well. It's really key because that way, once it cycles back to the beginning of the array, then that's like after it's been an hour since you started leveling. And it'll start forgetting the experience you were earning at the beginning of the last hour and replacing it with the experience that you're earning at the beginning of the next hour. And in that way, it's always looking back an hour whenever we add up all the elements in our hourly EXP array. So we've got our actual now, right? And that means we can calculate our EXP earned in terms of our base EXP per mob. And we've called that E sub A. So delta A, this is the, we're going to calculate the total EXP earned in the last hour. And then we're going to calculate the attenuated EXP gained for killing this mob. Now I got to think about this. This is our base EXP. Now, what did we say back here? So basically, it's our big A that we're calculating, and we need to use big A divided by 10 to the 6th in this equation, right? So do I want to just, yeah, so we'll do it actually in the equation. So I'm going to say E sub B, or E sub A, the actual amount we get. Now this is, remember, we're implementing the current version right now. And it's this line that we're going to have to change for the model to model our tweak that we're going to recommend. So here, we can see EA is going to be our base amount, E sub B, raised to an exponent. And that exponent is going to be 2 minus our delta A, the amount of experience we've earned in the last hour, divided by 10 to the 6th. This is how Shroud calculates it. So now we've got our actual amount that we've earned. And so we're going to update our indexes. We're going to say, so now we need to update all of our arrays. So we have time index. Oops, it's parentheses. Time index is equal to we got to change this a little bit. We're going to start these at we're going to start this one at 2. And then I want to say time of 0. Well, it's already going to equal 0 from the initialization. And total EXP versus time is going to be 0 at 0, so that's good. So that's just going to give me 0, 0 from my first element of time. And then I just want to say time index. Time at this index is time at the last one. Plus the time step. And that's going to give us a time in minutes because our time step was swapped to minutes here. Or was converted from hours to minutes. And then the total EXP versus time, a value at the same index, is going to equal the total EXP versus time at the last index plus the amount that we just earned. The actual amount, E sub A. And finally, we're going to say our hourly EXP array evaluated at our hourly index is going to literally equal just the amount that we just earned. Because this is keeping track, how much did we earn for this mob kill only in this slot of the hourly array. Finally, we're going to update our indices. And our time index is just going to equal time index plus 1. That always increases every step through our loop. However, our hourly index is going to be a little bit different. Hourly index, we'll assume that we just increase it by 1. And then we'll say if hourly index is greater than new, remember that's the number of mobs we kill per hour, then we're going to set it back to 1 so that we loop back to the beginning of our hourly array and start overwriting the EXP we were earning before. And in that way, our hourly array, when we add up all the elements of it, it will always just give us the total amount of EXP we gained in the last hour and nothing else. Just trying to think, do we want to keep track of some other things here? Because that's basically it. I mean, our model's written. That's going to get it for us. Of course, there's probably like a gazillion bugs in there, and I'll have to sort them out. But that's the overarching thing. But I think we want to keep track of a few other things here. Because I'm doing a lot of plots of total EXP gained. We've got that versus time, right? That's what we've saved. We're going to be able to get that plot. But another one that we plot is the actual rate as a function of time. And so let's get an array for that. An array to keep track of our actual rate of EXP versus time. And this is going to be actual EXP versus time. Rate versus time. And it's going to be the same. Zeros, 1 to num time steps plus 1. And we'll come down here and the actual rate versus time index is just simply going to be delta A. The sum of our hourly array at this point in time. So this is going to tell us at this point in time, here's how much EXP we earned in the last hour, right? And it's going to keep track of that as a function of time as we step through this whole thing. What's wrong here? And there we go. Total time we're not using that value. Why not? I guess we don't need it. See, this is what when you take our final time index minus 1 and you multiply by the time steps, we should get our total time, but it doesn't really. It'll all be contained in this time array. So yeah, I think this is pretty good. And so let's output, we want to output these arrays. Time. So let's come up here, we're going to say time, get you out there, total, EXP versus time. And our actual EXP rate versus time. And they want me to separate the output variables with commas, which I can do. All right. You guys want to run it? See how spectacularly it fails? I'm going to have to switch my directory or it's going to be like, I don't recognize what you're talking about. My code. Okay, so let's start with, remember, this is our, delta B is our base EXP rate. In other words, how much experience we'd be getting an hour if we were not attenuated. I'm going to start with 1,000,000. And that should be the that should be unattenuated. We should never reach attenuation because we are only earning 1 million experience an hour. We're going to assume we're killing 240 mobs every minute. That's a mob every 15 seconds. And every mob is worth the same amount of EXP. And we don't actually use this yet, so I haven't implemented T on or T off. But let's just there we go. Let's just put in 60 for T on, so we're assuming with that number that we're never taking a break. We're just going to level all the way through. So that's the next thing to do is implement the breaks in here. But this should give us, as is, should give us the result if we don't have any breaks. So let's see what it comes up with. Oh my gosh, that was fast. It's already done. And let's plot time and total EXP versus time. Let's see what we get here. Oops. Look at that. Close that. That does not look right. Let's see what our time value is. It's 1440. That's 1440 right there. So that's right. Oh, look, the last element is 0, so it's... I don't understand why we're seeing this staircase pattern, but it's doing something really weird because we never make it to this last element. So maybe I've made our array too big? Let's try that. What is going on here? Why are we getting this stair step thing? One line there. Let's see, what do I expect for this? This is EXP gained per time. It should be a straight line. I'll clean this up. And this is the sausage, right? This is how the sausage gets made. That's correct, Gravity. EXP, the total EXP gained, we shouldn't be getting any flat staircases. It should just be a straight line. And I'm not sure what we're seeing here. This is the same as that, which is the same as this. Look, these numbers aren't changing. So something's really, really screwed up. So let's go back into the code. So time is... should be 0 to begin with. And then we just keep adding EA. So EA... oh, wait a second. We got to put in our logic here, right? If... yeah, what's happening is that this number is equal to 1. So what we want to say here is if delta A if delta A is greater than 1, 10 to the 6. Then we're going to do this. Else, if delta is less than or equal to 10 to the 6, then we just say E sub A. Oh, that's not else if. Else if, there we go. Then we'll just say E sub A is equal to E sub B, because it's unattenuated. And then finally else E sub A is 0. If we're somehow greater than earning 2 million in the last hour. And so first of all, that needed to go in. Let's see what that does for us here. Oh. Delta A. There we go. Okay, so that's exactly what I would expect. So, in other words, our total gain, our total EXP gain per hour is fixed at 1 million an hour. And so our total, you know, our slope of our line should be constant at 1 million an hour. It never gets attenuated, and this is what we get. Now, let's crank it up to 2 million an hour and see what happens. We're still getting some funky stuff going on here. Why is there these two lines? This time array is weird. Yeah, there's these extra 2 zeros here that's screwing it up. So that means we got to go back to here. Think about time index less than times. So I always get screwed up with indices in MATLAB because the indices of arrays start at 1. So if I change this back to +1 like we had it, let's see if those 2 zeros become 1 0. Yeah, there's just 1 0. So we got to go to +2? Whatever. Whatever. Oh, it's because of this +1 here. Okay, we make that +1. Get rid of this +1 here. And everything should be too legit to quit now. Let's look at our time array. Yeah, okay, cool. So now we're not getting this weird like line going back to the beginning kind of thing. And if we plot our time versus total EXP, you can see that now this is getting bumpy, right? And it's starting to attenuate. And I really wish there used to be a little bar here. Plot edit toolbar. Nope. Camera toolbar. Nope. Figure toolbar. Property inspector figure palette. Plot browser? That's not what we want. There used to be like a little magnifying glass, and looks like they've changed this. Property editor, figure palette. So there's tools, zoom in. Really want to look at this region here. See how it's starting to bend over really significantly? Let's go back and get our last result. So our first result was just 1 million experience an hour. And when we plot that, it's a straight line. And then if we up it to 2 million as our base experience per hour, so in other words, this would take you 30 minutes to reach the attenuation when the little light turns on your EXP bar. You can see we're earning more experience than we were at 2 million or at 1 million an hour, like we should, right? Because we're killing mobs basically twice as fast. But we're starting to get this bending over effect where there's regions of really fast EXP gain and then slow EXP gain, and then fast EXP gain and then slow EXP gain. If I crank this up to 3 million, or let's just go all the way to 4, right? 4 million an hour. Then of course we're going to get more experience than we were at 2 million an hour base. But the length of time when we're actually gaining our experience is getting shorter, and the time when we're flat is getting longer. And notice how attenuation is really working the way it's supposed to here. This is the blue line. I'm only getting 1 million an hour. The black line, I'm leveling. I'm killing 3 times more mobs, right? If they were all equal in EXP to the guy only getting 1 million an hour, I'm killing 3 times more mobs. But look at what's happening here. At 1 hour, I'm only, 1.2 million instead of 1 million. So I'm getting, instead of getting 3 million an hour, I'm getting 1.2, right? And if I was unattenuated, I would be at 3 million by this point. So this is good. This is working. This is the total amount of experience gained versus time here. And so, boom, our model's already in good shape. Now we got to put the brakes in, right? We gotta take into account whether I'm on break or not. And that's where this T on and T off comes in. So I'm going to assume that you start EXPing at the beginning of the hour, and then once you EXP for the amount of time for T on, then you switch to a break. So let's go figure that out. Now we're going to use our hourly index for this, because our hourly index is always already able to keep track of this. But what we need to do is figure out if what index does our hourly index need to be less than, such that we're actually gaining experience. So let's see here. Doing calculations up here. Now our hourly index is going to go from 1 to new, right? And then once it gets bigger than new, that's when it gets put back to 1. So new is the number of kills per hour, right? And we have t on is the number of minutes we want to kill. So how does that translate into new, right? Well, for our example of new equals 240, that was 15 seconds for every kill, right? So if you have 15 minutes on and you're killing a mob every 15 seconds, well, that's 4 mobs killed per minute. So 15 times 4 would be 60, and that would be our final index that we would want to count. So let's create a new index here. This is going to be last index before break. Could you simplify this by using EXP per minute instead of EXP per mob times mobs killed per hour? Definitely. I mean, it could be, I don't know if it would be any simpler, but it would definitely be doable that way. The problem is you can't do, okay, so it won't work. EXP per minute won't work because you have to, remember how Shroud calculates the attenuation. Every time you earn experience, Shroud looks back at the last amount of the last hour and looks at how much experience you've earned, and then it attenuates the experience for that mob based off of how much you've earned in the last hour. So we basically, our indices that we're looping over here represent a mob kill. So every time we increment our index, we're talking about the next time we kill a mob. And we have to stay in that regime because every time we kill a mob, we have to attenuate properly. Because then that mob's, the actual amount of experience that we gain for that mob then gets thrown into the calculation for the next mob kill as to how much we've earned in the last hour, right? So it has to be updated every single time we kill a mob. It makes new a constant of 60. Yeah, so we don't want, so that's what I'm saying. Like, new needs to be our frequency of mobs killed per hour. And that would be 60 minutes per hour, I think is what you're saying, right? And then we just deal with this every minute. So the equivalent way, so this model will capture exactly the way you're trying to do it, as long as we just set new to 60, right? And then you will have 1 minute for every single time step. And you're assuming that you're only killing 1 mob a minute, and you're earning that base EXP every minute. Does that make sense, Gravity? Right. So you could set new to 60, but so this is more general, right? We're allowing that frequency to change. And actually, I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to make this new a constant, because just like our total time, because we don't really want it to change every time we're looking at the model, you know, calculating. We want to come up with one good number for new. And if you go back to my paper here, I experimented with this, with different values for new, right here. And I look at the total EXP gained versus the time and minutes since the EXP started, right? For 3 different values of new. One, and the first one is the 60 that you're talking about. And what you can see here is that as new gets bigger, these are, first of all 3 of these curves are almost right on top of each other. So changing this value makes very little difference in the results. But as new gets bigger, the EXP that you gain for the same base rate of experience per hour slightly creeps up. Okay, the purpose of this is to show, this plot is to show that really, you know, the real way you gain EXP in Shroud is usually not this way. You don't kill a mob every equal length time interval, and every mob is not always equal to the same amount of experience. But by changing new, we're vastly changing in what, like how often we're earning experience, basically. And and this plot shows that we basically get the same results for the same base experience, right? These are all calculated at the same base experience per hour of 2.5 million an hour, right? So for that base, so it's really the base experience per hour that makes a big difference, unless new gets really small. I'm guessing that if new became like 2 or 1 or something like that, you would see a dramatic difference here, right? So we want to make sure new is high enough so that this results are smoothed out and it better approximates how you actually gain EXP. Cool. Good question, man. Good question. So the last index before break, then, so we've got new in hours, we've got T on in minutes. So we want to convert T on to hours. And we do that just by dividing by 60 minutes per hour. And that'll be some fraction of an hour, right? Do we want to do that? We also have our time step down here in minutes. So we could do it with the time step, right? So let's see. We're basically looking for the index. Call it I. I times our time step is equal to T on. Right? How many time steps do we need so that this is greater than or equal to T on? And so that's going to say when I is greater than or equal to T on divided by our time step, right? In minutes. And so we can, this might be give us a fractional value, but we can floor it to get the actual index. And it shouldn't give us a fractional value. So let's do that. I think that's right. So is there a floor function? Rounding towards negative infinity, yeah. So what we want to say is last index before break is going to be floor of T on divided by our time step. But we need to move this down here to after we convert time step to minutes, because our T on is in minutes. This is the last. We break for the rest of the hour. So now what I can do here, see, EA is the actual amount of EXP that we're going to get, right? And so what I can say here is if hourly index is less than or equal to, what do we call it? Last index before break. Then we're going to say, then we want all this stuff to occur that we just did. Otherwise, we're not going to earn any experience because we're taking a break, right? How cool is that? That's all we had to do. Now we've got breaks implemented. So like I said, this model is not, programmatically, is not that complicated. But understanding what it's doing, right? That's where, at least that's what took me so long to figure out. Okay. So this looks good. And let's test this out. So I want to kind of reproduce one of these plots in the paper here. So let's look at this one, which is like super. So here we've got a base EXP rate of 5 million an hour. So you're earning 5 times what it would take an hour for you to, you're killing 5 times as many mobs as it would take for you to turn your light on right at the end of your hour, right? And we should get something like this. So first of all, T on is what we're passing in, right? It's amazing. We only need T on and delta B for this. So great. Okay. So let's clear this crap. We're going to do this plot, but again, I don't need new now because I've set new in here. I set it to 240, right? Yeah. And we're going to leave T on at 60. So I'm not taking any breaks again, and this is going to be 5 times 10 to the 6 is our total amount of EXP per hour. I think it booted me out of Shroud, didn't it? We're getting the starting screen. Oops. Okay. So we get this, and then we plot time total EXP. Total EXP versus time. Oops, we got to get rid of this. Okay, that, if we zoomed in, it would look a lot like this blue line that you can see barely underneath all these other ones, right? But it's starting to spread out up here. So that looks good. And then let's try it with 45 minutes on, 15 minutes off. And I'm going to do the same plot, but we'll put this one in red. I think red was what I used here. Yeah, red, and then magenta, and then black. Or that's not magenta, that's cyan. Oops, I overwrote the other one. So let's redo this. Now we'll hold that. 45. plot it this time with red. There we go. So you can see, right, like, this is an insane amount of EXP, and the guy in red is only taking a 15-minute break every hour. And look, he's catching up like crazy in this region. But you can see if you level long enough, eventually the guy who is leveling continuously will earn more EXP way out here, right? But look at how long you have to level. You got to go for like 1,000 minutes, you know, before that's going to happen. And what's 1,000? 1,000 divided by 60, you know, it's like you got to level for like 17 hours straight before you start earning appreciably more experience than the person who's taking this strategic break, right? And nobody levels for that long continuously. So all the action on this plot is really in this region down here, all the action that's really relevant for a Shroud. But you can see how the attenuation system was designed, even with this extreme form of attenuation that we have right here. You can see in the math that it's plopping out that, yes, you should always be able to get more experience by continuously leveling than by taking breaks. That's built into the design, and it is, quote-unquote, working. The problem is it's impossible to tell that it's working when we are in the region that matters for XP gain, right? This is about 4 hours right here, and who levels more than 4 hours straight? And you can see that the person who's taking the 15-minute break is always catching back up very easily. Every hour, this portion gets a little bit bigger until finally the person in red doesn't ever catch up to the person in blue, right? The person who's leveling continuously. So you can see that it was designed to attenuate, not cap. But unfortunately, the reality is that because the attenuation is so extreme, it's basically turning into a cap. Let's do the 15-minute or the 30-minute on, 30-minute off. And now we'll do this plot, but with cyan. And see, the cyan is again now falling behind the red a little bit. And if we blow it back out, all right, you can see cyan is even further under the red. It's really hard to see this picture. So again, the person who's taking 30-minute breaks, catching up to the person who's leveling continuously all the way until about here, all right, which is 700 minutes it takes the person leveling continuously to keep leveling before he notices any marginal increase over the person that's not taking breaks, or that's taking 30-minute breaks. And then eventually the 30-minute break person falls behind even the 45-minute or the 15-minute break person, right? But again, all the action is back here, and you can see that if you time your break strategically, you're going to catch right back up. No problem. So we'll finally just finish this off. But I'm pretty confident that this is working now. Oh, did I put 40 in? Should have put 45. Let's redo C, just so we get that exact. Wait. No, C was 30. 30 minutes on. What's going on here? Oh, I've got too many now. Okay. 60 minutes on. We plot it blue. Hold that. 45 minutes on. We plot it with red. 30 minutes on. We plot it with cyan. And 15 minutes on. We plot it with black. And boom, there you go. So the person, you know, if you're going to level for an entire day and you take 15-minute breaks, or you only level for 15 minutes every hour, you're going to fall behind by 50 million by the end of the day. Not 50 million, that's not right. 5 million. You're going to fall behind by 5 million by the end of the day. All right? But, come on. Who levels continuously for 24 hours? Right? Just doesn't happen. So, let's zoom into the region where it actually matters. Right in here. And you can see boom. Right, you can see that even the person who's only leveling 15 minutes, that's black, 15 minutes every hour, is easily catching up with the person that's blue. But this is a lot of grinding. I mean, you're moving. You're getting 5 million base EXP every hour here. Right? And so I did some plots for less. Here's 2.5 million every hour. And you can see that you can't take more than a 30-minute break or you'll never catch back up. Right? On any of these cycles. But even a 30-minute break gets you right back up to the person who's leveling continuously. So they're leveling twice. They're leveling for twice as much time as you, and you're getting the same, for all intents and purposes, the same amount of experience as them over this time interval. And then here's 1.5 million experience an hour. So you're just barely getting attenuated here. And you can see the blue line, the person who's leveling continuously, is very close to being just that straight curve that we saw for complete unattenuation. Right? And here, you can only take if you're getting that little EXP, you can only really take a 15-minute break if you want to catch the person who's leveling continuously. But all this is like evidence that, like, why should this be? We don't want this curve. Right? We don't want this curve to look this way. We want even the person who's taking a 15-minute break to get less experience than the person who's continuously leveling. But we still want we want the experience to attenuate so that they don't just, the amount of experience you can gain just grows without bound. Right? We want to thread that needle. And that's where this plot comes in. See, after I do my recommended change to the equation where we use this guy, look at what happens to this plot. You can see that the person taking 15-minute breaks here is getting closer to catching up, but isn't going to quite get there. And this is, by the way, this is the 5 times 10, this is 5 million an hour, right? So you're still really freaking, if you didn't get attenuated, you'd be earning 5 million an hour here. So this is incredibly high saturation. And that should be compared to the plot that we just made, which was at 5 million, right? Wasn't it? Was it? Yeah, 5 million an hour. So if you look at this plot and you compare it to this one, you can see the difference. Right? The person in blue is the one who's leveling continuously. And even the person who's only taking a 15-minute break they can almost catch up to him after the first cycle. But then for the second cycle, they're definitely behind. Already, right? They're already behind. So we're seeing this, what we were seeing in the long-term asymptotic region of this, like after you've been leveling for a day, we're seeing in this close region, which this is only 5 hours, right? This is 5 hours on this time scale, because you're up to 300 here. Right? And so, and the person who's only leveling for 15 minutes every hour, oh my gosh, they have no hope of catching up, right? Ever. Whereas they were easily catching up over here. So this is what we want to do. See how similar, like qualitatively, these are very similar. these two different approaches. So we're maintaining the spirit of the attenuation system, but we're eliminating the need to stop, or the advantage of stopping leveling if you want to continue. Of course, even under this system, if you do take a break, when you come back, you'll be unattenuated and you'll be earning more experience than you were once you got attenuated. So the breaks can still be constructive. I mean, I personally like the breaks. I just can't mash buttons for that long in a row. But I don't think the game should force that issue, right? I don't think it should, and I feel like hardcore players are really turned off by that. They want to be able to grind. And some people just don't have a lot of time to do it, and they want to fit all their grinding time into one compact amount of time, and so they should be able to get some decent results from that. So we need to reproduce these results now over here and put them into the model. And in order to do that, we have to change in our model how this is calculated right here. This is the Shroud way of doing it, right? The way Shroud currently does it. We're going to replace that with the way that I'm recommending, and we're going to see some different results. And then once we get the model all in place, once we reproduce what we did in the paper here, then I'm going to make some new plots that hopefully really show this off. I'm going to talk about how do we eliminate the forced breaks, how do we fix the fact that we're going to be introducing attenuation earlier so that players who are earning less than 1 million experience an hour are not penalized. And finally, I'm going to talk about how do we replace this stupid button or the stupid light that just turns on. I shouldn't say stupid. It's just misleading. There's so much confusion about that attenuation light, in my opinion, misinforming people as to how attenuation works. I think most people think when that light turns on, they stop gaining EXP, and that's not true at all. It's just that's when you start getting attenuated. So I would like to replace this binary light on and off with some kind of slider or other visual element that tells you how much you're attenuated, right? And the more you grind and the more you're gaining, like killing more and more powerful mobs and gaining EXP faster and faster, the more you should become attenuated, and you should be able to look at your EXP pool and see next to it how attenuated you are, right? So those are going to be our goals, and then we'll write up that post. How cool is this? Okay, the coffee's making me have to use the restroom. I'm going to come back. We're going to kill Man Smasher again because I need a little bit of break from this. But I'm really happy with the progress. We've been only doing this for 2 hours, and we've already got the model back in working shape to completely model what Shroud is doing on experience attenuation. And so the only thing we have to do to change this model now is to implement the new way or the recommendation that I have of calculating this. All right, so stick around, guys. I'll be right back. More excited. Regardless of the state of the model, those goals are excellent. Thank you so much, Gravity. Absolutely. That's what we want, right? We want to keep the gap between casual and hardcore from exploding. That's the whole point of attenuation in the first place. But we want to reward constant leveling as well. We don't want the players at the high end to feel like they're being penalized. All right. PP time. Be right back. All right, I need to smash Man Smasher real quick. So that's what we're gonna do. I'll have to edit this out. Or maybe I could just leave it in and people could fast forward if they don't want to watch this part. But yeah, I'm going to put this stream up on YouTube in case anyone is interested after the fact and missed it. Get some buffs going. See if Torque Doll spawned for us. Oh, there he is. Ah, run away! I gotta make sure I keep my front to them because I've got all these buffs that give me frontal defense at the expense of back defense. Oh, that's a lot of damage. Heal. And that is why life specialty is very nice. Oh, I shouldn't have put my ring there. Come on, buddy. There we go, that's better. How many hit points? 8,000, okay, we're good. Burn, baby, burn. Yeah, and the other thing that we want, on top of the goals I was mentioning before, we really want to make sure that the way we do this is easy to implement, right? That's the key. It's got to be easily done. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I'm really trying to do with all these plots and calculations with the model, is to show, like, look, this isn't just some hodgepodge idea, you know? It's not like it's just throwing something out off the top of my head. This is well researched. I got an ad. Gotta entice him to get back here. I kind of, I already alluded to this idea in my paper, but to your point of communicating it well enough, it's like, what I'm trying to do here is, like, spell it out, like, in very simple terms. Maybe I'll write a second, like, write-up about it, a little bit more detailed, and then do a forum post that really just captures the summary. Where's this other wizard at? There you are. Oh man, that is ouch city. I just took a swipe. He can one-shot me with that swipe. I got lucky. Gotta entice that wizard to get over here. Yeah, there you go. That clap, man, could have killed me. My hit points just aren't high enough to survive hits by this guy. $500. He's about to fall. Alright. Very nice. Flute of Defiance and another ring. Cool. Ooh, a troll encounter room. Are those good? Ooh, another torque doll. Crap. I put away my... Oh, I lost all my stacks. Keep forgetting to swap out Fireball for, or swap out Meteors for Fireball. Patrol encounter rooms. I'll have to get one up on the vendor. I only killed them twice and got it, so either I got really lucky or they're not that rare. They're just chilling over there. It's a bit annoying. That archer behind me, did you see him? Oh man, that hurt. He's like hit me for 250. Okay. I am satiated. Carnage. Two solid last 30 days, 50K and 100K. Is that for the rewards? Very nice. Or the monthly, the amount they raised or sold, I guess as it is now. Oh, that's what you sold them for? Oh, two sold last 30 days, 50K and 100K. Okay, cool. Very nice. Okay, where were we? we were going to implement so if we go back to page 1 here, or page 2, this is where I was talking about the Shroud theory. And basically we came up with this E equals B to the 2 minus A. This is, E is the actual experience you gain, B is the base amount of experience the mob would be worth if you didn't get attenuated. And A is the amount of experience you've gained in the last hour divided by 1,000,000. So this is like 2 million minus however many millions, of something over 1 million, right? And then you divide that by 1,000,000 and you get something between, this is going to ultimately be a number between 0 and 1. And B to the 1 equals B, and it'll be that when A is 1 mil, when big A is 1 million experience per hour, we'll still be getting the base amount of EXP, and B to the 0 is equal to 1, right? So we're going to drop from our 1,000 to 1 as we go from 1 to 2 on A. Okay, blah, 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 blah. So that's how the current equation works. Now, what we want to do, here we go, is replace this with something that is less, first of all, introduces the attenuation much more gradually and has less concavity to it. Well, the least amount of concavity you can have is a straight line. But this is a really complicated form because you can see that the base, the form where the A comes in, the amount of experience that you've earned in the last hour, is in the exponent to the B. And that's not desirable because this turns it into this exponential function, which is exactly what you get when you plot. Unfortunately I've deleted our plot. But we had a plot, and it basically looked something like this, right? The fact that this is an exponential function, that this A is in the exponent of this B, is what gives us this shape for our curve. This is E versus A, right? And this is 1 here, and then this would be 2, and this is going to be 1, and this is going to be 1,000. So it gives us this shape. And what we want is something that's much less steep, right? We want like a straight line connecting these points, so that we have the same rate of attenuation here as we do down here. And that's what's going to eliminate our oscillations. That's the whole first paper was all about. So what I recommend changing this to then is writing E is equal to some multiplicative factor that's a function of A times our B. Okay, and the specific one that I recommended, and I also want it to, oh crap, thanks Gravity, you saved me, man. There we go, that's what we want. Okay, so it's this exponential form where A is in the exponent of B that gives rise to this yellow curve here. Right? When we plot E versus A. And what we want is something way less extreme. And because it's that extreme nature which gives rise to the rapid oscillations in the actual rate of EXP gain, which in turn gives rise to the long breaks, or the long periods of time where we're not gaining experience, right? See that? Long periods of time where we're not gaining experience. This isn't quite the right picture, actually. That's the... right here. See, the black line is the base rate is just 1 million experience an hour, and you never get attenuated. You're always gaining constantly. And this is what players are used to, right? In an MMO. That's what players are used to. So we want to get kind of as close back to that as we can without eliminating the attenuation. And what you can see is as your base rate increases here, you end up with periods of really intense experience gain, and followed by long periods, or followed by other periods of basically no gain. And the higher your base rate is, the more time you're spending in the no gain section. So we want to decrease that. We want something that looks more like this. See how our blue line, which is continuous EXP here, the reason these are flat in certain parts is because you're on a break. You're literally not gaining any experience in this picture during those parts. But the blue line, even though it still has these dips, especially right at the beginning, it's very quickly going to this straight line, relatively speaking. It's still taking 2 hours to get there, right? You're still going to see some fluctuation in this region, but you're much closer to transitioning from this straight line here. See, if you extended this straight line, it would come up like this, right? So we're basically like unattenuated. Oops, I didn't mean to open that. Unattenuated would look like EXP versus time. Unattenuated would just be a straight line, right? So what we're doing here is we're going to have this straight line kind of get converted to another straight line that's less sloped. So this would be our unattenuated result. This would be our attenuated result. But regardless of, and you're going to have a little bit of bump in here before you get to this really linear period, but you're going to still feel like you're gaining equivalent EXP for equivalent amounts of time. And that's what people are used to when it comes to gaining EXP in an MMO, right? So it's like, I mean, it's beautiful. It's like the best of both worlds. And to do that, we are going to make this m sub m as a function of a equal to, our multiplicative constant was, it's in the paper here, negative 1/3 a plus 1. That's it. So now look at how much simpler our equation for E becomes. It's really, if we plug this in for M, our E is equal to negative 1/3 A plus 1 times the base rate of EXP gain for that mob. The base amount you would get if you, not the base rate, but the base amount of EXP you would get for killing that mob. A is the amount of experience you've earned in the last hour divided by 1,000,000. And E is the actual experience you get for that mob, for killing that mob. And see how much simpler this is than the Shroud? But it's not the simplicity of the equation that matters. It's the fact that this one removes all the concavity. And it's the concavity that was giving us those rapid fluctuations in the rate, which led to the long stretches of basically very little experience gain. And then the short times of massive EXP gain. So we can come back here, and what I'm going to do is just, here's the Shroud way of doing it. I'm just going to comment it out. And here what I'm going to say is, for my way, I'm going to say if delta A is greater than 3 million, 3 times 10 to the 6. So this is the amount of experience you've gained in the last hour, greater than 3 million. Then we're just going to say the actual experience you get for this mob is 0. Else, if it's not, then E sub A, the actual experience, is negative 1/3 times. Now we need to write, remember this is how much experience you've gained in the last hour. So we in our equation, this little a means how much experience you've gained in the last hour divided by 1,000,000. So we're going to write times delta A divided by 10 to the 6. And we're going to add 1 to that. And then we're going to take that times E sub B, the base E experience we would get for killing this mob. So this is our attenuation multiplier. Now, this is really, you can experiment with lots of different forms for this multiplier, and in the paper I do just that. I have this plot here, figure 9, that shows 5 different forms for this m as a function of our experience gained per hour, or in the last hour, right? Our actual experience rate. And you can see I explored different levels of concavity, and whether you were above this linear line or below. And I've got all these different results for it, and it shows that the linear one is the one with the least bumpiness. And whether it's above the linear line or below the linear line just means, like, see here, you're heavily the purple one here, you're heavily not attenuated until you get to 1.5 million, and then all of a sudden it kicks in, and boom, you get attenuated super fast, right? Here you just get attenuated super fast. So this one, the purple, you're going to get more experience overall than the blue, but you're still going to have just as much bumpiness as the blue in your rate. So look at purple and blue, right? Well, the purple one takes actually longer to reach equilibrium, interestingly enough. But if you look at the stretches, actually blue is really not that bad compared to purple, right? Purple is really flat and really gaining a lot. You can see that you're always gaining more with the purple, but regardless, it's the light blue one that's in the middle that has the least amount of wiggles to it. And then I extended the range so that we start attenuation right at 0 in order to get those wiggles down even more. Oh, and I need an end here. All right. So let's go ahead and look at that. So now I want to do what? What do we want to do? I want to reproduce something in here. Yeah, let's look at this plot. Right. So this is no breaks, but for 4 different values of the base experience you're earning per hour. So let's put that for 0 for no break, or 60 means no breaks because we're always on, right? That's what we have here. T on. And then we're going to try 60, 1 million experience per hour. Plot time and total EXP versus time. Oops, I forgot. I need to close this guy. And so here you can see, look at how less wiggly this is than we had before. Let's do this with, well, actually, it's less wiggly because we have barely any attenuation happening, but the actual Shroud curve for this would be a straight line period that's more sloped. So let's calculate the actual Shroud curve. This is going to get really annoying commenting and uncommenting code, so I want to just put in a new parameter. Shroud. So otherwise we'll use mine. So I'm going to say here, if Shroud is equal to 1. Let's actually, this is a double precision value, so we got to be a little bit careful. So I'm going to say if the absolute value of Shroud minus 1 is less than, I don't know, 0.001, right? So we're really close to 1. Is that fine, MATLAB? Then I want to do all this stuff. Else. We'll do it my way. And we don't need a semicolon there. Okay, so let's look at some results here. So we're going to look at 10 to the 6. So we're just learning 1 million experience an hour. And I want to do it the Shroud way, so I'm going to put in 1. So we plot total EXP versus time. And time over here. And we get this straight line like we expect. And now let's do it my way. Oops. Yeah, so see what's happening? They're both incredibly straight lines. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can see what's really going on in the sweet spot over here. They're both pretty straight, but my line, it starts out really close to Shroud's because you're very little attenuated, but you're still getting attenuated, even though you're not earning more than a million experience an hour. And so it bends down slightly, but then becomes very straight, highly linear, right? So we need to find a way so that the person who's earning, so that this is ameliorated, because anyone who's earning $1 million or less is going to be getting less experience than they were before. And this shows you by exactly how much. So there needs to be an increase in the base amount of experience per mob to combat that. And we're going to use this value. This is where it's most extreme. If you're getting like 200K an hour right now, then under my situation you might get, 190 or 195K an hour, right? So it's going to be very small. But once as you approach $1 million, the gap between what I'm doing and what you're getting, is going to get bigger, than the Shroud way. And that's kind of what this this plot in the paper shows. The one at the very end here. See how much bigger of a difference you have right at $1 million between the original and the new way. But then there's going to come a point a little bit after $1 million where the new way will give you more experience than the old way. right? And so we just got to fix that kink so that we raise this whole curve up basically by this amount. This whole red curve needs to be pushed up by that amount there, and then you'll match right there, but everyone else will be getting more. And the thing that we gain from that is that we gain having this really stable form, and for the experience gain. And there's not going to be any region where you're really not gaining any experience. It's going to slow down a little bit to begin with, but then eventually, it's very quickly, within an hour, you've reached the equilibrium value. We're already within an hour at a straight line here, right? Which is exactly what we want. So let's make a plot like this. So I'm going to kill this because it was a little bit weird the way I made it. So I'm going to say, here's the real way. I want to plot this. And then here's my way. And we'll plot this. Okay, those are both at 1 million. So now let's crank this up to 2.5 million an hour, would be your unattenuated rate. And I'm going to plot this one, but I'm going to make it dashed. And then my way, plot it and dashed. Oh, that looks ugly. Original way. Oh, we have to go all the way back to the beginning now. Do that. Hold. Okay, we haven't... What am I doing? Close this. Come down here. This is the original, but I want 1 million. With Shroud. I want to plot this. Then I want 1 million my method, which is going to give us less experience per time. Unbelievable. There it is. Now let's go to 2.5 million. With Shroud, I want to plot this as blue with a dashed line. $2.5 million my way. And we're going to plot this red with a dashed line. There we go. Okay. We want this cut at about 300. So this is 5 hours here. Now, let's make a legend. This is 1 e to the 10, or to the 6. So that's 1 million. I'll just write 10 to the 6. That's how we've been doing it. 10 to the 6 soda. 10 to the 6 mine. 2.5 times 10 to the 6 soda. 2.5 times 10 to the 6 mine. better. Oops. Don't care about that color, but I do want to make it bigger so y'all can see the numbers. And let's make these wider. So at 1 million, which is again 1 million and below, and actually a little bit above 1 million, you're always going to be earning less experience than you would have with soda. With soda's way of doing it, you're going to earn less with my way. And this is showing that. The blue is just an unattenuated straight line, and mine is starting out very close to that, but then once you reach an hour, you've transitioned into a new line with a smaller slope. Right. Now, look at what happens when you get up to like 2.5 million an hour. Now, my way of so again, we should expect that for all these plots, soda is always going to be more than my way of doing it for some period of time, right? Because soda doesn't attenuate at all until you reach 1 million experience. Whereas mine starts attenuation right at the beginning. So for the first some amount of time, my way is always going to be less than soda. But then look what happens with soda. Soda clamps it, and now you have this long region where you're not gaining any experience, right? And then now you start gaining experience, and then clamped again, long region where you're barely gaining any, and then eventually those oscillations peter out, and you end up with a straight line for soda, But it takes a day of constant leveling to get there. And nobody makes it past this point right here because they stop and then let their attenuation reset, and then they redo it on the really fast curve. But here, with the new method of doing it, even though I'm starting attenuated very, very soon, you can see that we very quickly pass what soda would give you for the amount of experience at this rate of killing. Within 45 minutes or 40 minutes here. And what's more important is that this line very smoothly transitions into this linear region. You can see it's a little bit humped up here, and then a little bit humped down in this region, and then by the time I get to here, I'm like completely straight line, right? But those little humps are so much less noticeable than these big long stretches of very little experience gain. And so qualitatively what we have here is the features that we desire. We want the experience to be attenuated. This flat line here is much less steeped than the actual straight line that we get. Like if we were to extend this line out, right? This is like very much like a line right here. If we just started to extend that out, you can see how much steeper that line, that's the unattenuated line. You can see how much steeper it is than the line we end up with that we're marching along. But we very smoothly transition to that line that we're marching along, and we're going to always perceive that we're gaining experience. When we look at our experience pool, it's always going up, and that's key. So we could do this. We could play the same game again and put, another one on there. But I think this really gets the point across. Yeah. So what we need to do is we need to fix this, the fact that we're getting less by bumping the rate, or bumping the base EXP. At 1 million. At when A is 1 million. How would we do that? Well, we know that E soda is equal to B to the 2 minus A. and E mine is equal to B times negative 1/3 A plus 1. Right? Is that what we did? Yeah. So what we want is to come up with a B prime over here, a B new, such that when A is 1, these two are equal to each other. So what we want is E soda A equals 1 to equal E mine when A equals 1. But we're going to let the base be different for mine versus soda. So, and we're going to say, so we're going to let this be like B prime. And we're going to say B prime is equal to some constant times B. So we're going to scale, and this is what we want. We want to know, what do we have to scale all the experience for every single mob in the game by, such that once this switch gets made, someone who is making a million experience an hour before will be making a million experience an hour after the change. Anyone who is making less than a million experience an hour will make a little bit more than they were, but it will never go over a million experience an hour. And anyone making more than a million experience an hour will be making more than they were before as well, right? Because it's that million experience an hour where this turning on the attenuation early hits the hardest. So this tells us B to the 2 minus 1 is equal to a constant times B times negative 1/3 plus 1. See that? Because A is 1 in both cases. B to the 2 minus 1 is just B to the first power, which is just B. So we're going to have a constant times B times, and what's 1/3 minus 1 minus 1/3? Well, that's 2/3. Now, if we divide both sides by B, we can see here that we're going to end up with 1 is equal to C times 2/3. Or C is equal to 3/2. And so that's what we need to do. Basically, that's of course equal to 1.5. So if they just scale all the base level mobs, like every mob, take the experience now that it's worth and multiply that by 1.5, and that's the new amount of base experience that it's worth, and then they implement this model, then nobody will perceive this as a nerf, right? No one will feel like their experience is getting nerfed. Is that beautiful or what? I mean, that's like too legit, right? Too legit to quit, MC Hammer. You guys remember that. You know what I'm talking about. So that's it. That's what we need. So wow, I haven't done this before, worked this out before, but that is so dang convenient how well that works out. Yeah, but you'll never convince me that gamers won't perceive change as a nerf. Well, I'll tell you what. If they implement this system as I'm recommending, everyone's going to see. I hear what you're saying. Absolutely, I hear what you're saying. I know you're just relatively joking. But I do want to say, but you're also serious because gamers are always like up in ends when things change, right? Up in arms, I should say. But what will happen is that everybody will get an EXP boost, basically. Right? Thank you. Everybody will get an EXP boost, and people at the higher end will be seeing lots more EXP. So people at the higher end of gameplay will be earning, instead of 1.2 to 1.3 million an hour, they'll be earning more like 1.8 to 1.9 to 2 million an hour under this result. And I know that Chris is, somebody told me at least that Chris in his streams has talked about raising the attenuation level to like 2 million when it kicks on instead of 1 million, right? Which I've, for episode 2, so that everybody gets a boost. And all that does is raise the soft cap of skill levels, right? If everybody's getting 140s at the top level for their attack spells, then they might get 150 after this change. But there'll still be this effective soft cap there. There'll be a boost to experience. And I haven't even talked about the kicker, which is there's another thing. So we haven't done this yet, but if you look at a plot here like I did in the paper, where was it? Nope, up here. This is delta B versus delta equilibrium. So delta equilibrium is like you take this plot and you see how this guy is becoming a straight line. It's got some wiggles over here. The red ones have some wiggles down in this region, but eventually they become a straight line, right? What's the slope of that straight line? Once they become straight lines, what's that slope? That's what I call your equilibrium rate, because that's how much, after you've been experiencing for a little while, that's how much experience you'll be gaining every hour, right? You'll reach some equilibrium rate and you'll always gain that amount of experience per time. So I have a plot here of that equilibrium rate versus the base amount of EXP. You can see that the equilibrium rate for the solid red line is smaller than the equilibrium rate for the dashed red line. And the dashed red line has a higher base amount of experience that you're earning. And that's what we want. The more you're killing, the more base level of mobs you're getting, the higher your rate of experience gain should be. But it's attenuated. This section is very flat, very straight too, and so is this section. And the difference between the slopes there is much greater than the difference between these two slopes. See that? And that's the attenuation math kicking in and doing exactly what we want it to do, right? So anyway, so I made this plot here of the equilibrium rate versus the base rate. And you can see that as your base rate goes up, like you keep getting more and more on your equilibrium rate. But for Shroud, it's like your equilibrium rate just is like almost a flat line, right? It almost doesn't matter how hard you push up here. Once you get to like 2, right? 2.5, there's very little progress you can make beyond that. 2.5 million an hour unattenuated, right? Whereas here you have incentive for the red line. You still have incentive to try to push your way up this curve because you're going to get more experience if you do. But to go from 2 to 4 is much less gain in experience than you get from going from 0 to 2, right? And 4 to 6 even less. And that's that's attenuation. So the shape of this curve, if you look at it, if we draw this out, right, you're going to have some. You're basically going to have like y equals x. That's unattenuated for this plot. This is our base EXP, and this is our equilibrium EXP rate. The base rate, how much I'm earning per hour if I wasn't attenuated, and the equilibrium rate, right? And if there was no attenuation, these would be the exact same, and that's why you have this line. And what you can see with my system is that in Shrouds, by the way, looks like this and then just cuts off, right? Just cuts off. Mine, it starts very close to this and then deviates, right? And eventually heads to some asymptote that it would never get across. And so this is for m of a equaling negative 1/3 a plus 1. But what we can do, and how did I get that, by the way? How did I get this equation? Well, I wanted a if you look at the actual experience you get versus the base experience you get when you actually kill a mob. So here the base experience is worth certain. No, this is A here. Right? Then Shrouds, here's 1 and 2. Shroud, maybe you have some like base. This here is EB, the base experience, right? Shroud starts at that base experience and then kind of does one of these numbers. Very, very quickly coming down. This looks like 2A, but I'm plotting the experience you get versus your rate. Or versus the actual amount of experience you've earned in the last hour. And mine was chosen so that if we extend this line to 3, then you basically just take this straight line and draw it out. Remember, that's kind of what we were doing at the beginning. So, and that's going to lead to this curve right here. Well, what happens? Let's change. Can I change this? I wonder. The color of it? No. Can't. There we go. Awesome. And all of this. Cool. So what happens now if I came out here to 4? Right? This would be like 4 million experience I gained in the last hour. And instead of attenuating according to the purple line, I attenuate now according to a new line. Let's make it red. Oops. All right. And I can actually do this plot very well with my model and get it exact, and I will. But I want to show you just qualitatively what it's going to look like. Well, if we do that, then what are we going to get over here for that choice of attenuation? See how this one is even less sloped than the purple? The red is even less sloped than the purple line. So we're attenuating even slower with the red line. Well, first of all, if we attenuate slower, we're going to earn more experience, right? But we're still going to end up with this, and we're going to reach our equilibrium value even faster, which is the key to all of this. We got to get to equilibrium fast so that we're always gaining experience per time, and people feel like they're always making progress when they're leveling. Well, if we replace the red one, we're still going to look like this, but then it's going to kind of curve off. It's going to stay along this unattenuated line for longer before it peels off. And then it's going to reach an equilibrium, a higher asymptotic equilibrium value, right? Oops. And so in other words, by just changing the slope and extending it further and further out, people are going to earn more and more experience for the same base level experience that they would have unattenuated. So what does that mean? Well, let's use the purple line for episode 2, but then when episode 3 comes out, we'll just use the red line, right? When episode 4 comes out, we'll make a line that's even less sloped out here to 5, and it'll get another one that's how you basically raise all the experience that everybody's getting in the game so that you can keep progressing, because you always need to do that as the expansions come out. But you maintain that all the quality of the content, right? Because once you switch to a new attenuation, the mobs that had the same base are now giving you more experience than they were before, even though their base level of experience didn't change. Right? So it makes it easy to just change the attenuation equation. You give everybody an across-the-board boost to EXP once an expansion comes out, and but you have the exact same qualitative features, and the attenuation maintains. So this is another idea that I'm going to pitch to them, why this system is so nice, because it's so easy to extend it. And the more you extend it, the more you raise this level cap, right? It actually makes the attenuation system work even better. It makes you get to equilibrium faster, and eliminates all of this crazy fluctuation in the rate of experience you're gaining. So that's basically it. So let's see, how do I capture that equilibrium rate in my model? So we have the actual rate versus time. It's very basic, right? No, I mean there's some the actual equations we're dealing with are anything you'd see in basic level algebra, but the design of the system is very deep, and it all comes from Chris. Chris designed all this, and that basically that whole design is contained in page 1 or page 2, right? It's contained right here in E equals B to the 2 minus A. Right, it's a beautiful system, and it takes a lot to tease out what this actually means, and that's what the model was for. But using the model, we can show that hey, we can get the same thing with a different choice of equation, but the same basic idea, right? And we can extend it to very easily give people boosts in their EXP. By the way, this is my favorite result of today. That C is that our constant is just 3/2. I mean, that's I had no idea it was going to pop out like that. But that's crazy. Crazy cool. And you can see it would just yeah, anyway. The golden ratio. Not quite. It's like it's not expressible as a decimal, right? Well, we can do a little diversion to the golden ratio if you want. So we have the Fibonacci sequence, right? Fib 1 1. The first two elements are 1, and then every element after that is the sum of the previous two. So the next one is 1 plus 1 is 2. The next one is 2 plus 1 is 3. Next one, 3 plus 2 is 5. Next one, 5 plus 3 is 8, right? Etc., etc. Right? And then if you look at the ratio, so we would say this is like A1, this is A2, this is A3, right? And in general, you could refer to one of these numbers as A sub n. You just tell me which index, and I'll go in here and count how many I need to go. And if n is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if n is 6, then an would be 8. Right, so A6 equals 8. See that? Because it's the 6th element in the sequence, right? So to get the golden ratio, you're talking about what's AN divided by AN minus 1 look like? And so for A2 over A1, you have 1 over 1 equals 1. And A3 over A2, you have 2 over 1 equals 2, and then A4 over A3, you've got 3 over 2 is equal to 1.5, right? And if you keep doing this, so on and so forth, like forever, this eventually approaches settles down. See here we bounced, we're over the golden ratio, we're under the golden ratio, now we're over, right? Under, over. Here we're going to be under again. But the next one's going to be a little bit over. But regardless, they're going to, if you were to plot these, right, you would get something like this, and then something like this, and then something here, and then something here, and then something here, and then something like here, right? And you can see that they're approaching some number, and this is the golden ratio. So in the language of calculus, we would write that the golden ratio is equal to the limit as n goes to infinity of an over an minus 1 for the Fibonacci sequence. And it's like 1.602 something blah 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 is what you get if you do this long enough. Yeah, no problem, man. The golden ratio. Man, I'm so pleased as punch with all this progress today. So we need to make this plot. So I'm going to do a new figure because I actually like the figure we've made, and I really like this one. I don't know if I'm going to use it in the write-up. I probably regenerate all this stuff to write this stuff up. But this is the essence of what we're going to have in that plot. I mean, it really shows what's going on, I think. And I might do one like, we should do like 500,000, right? Just to show that the difference between Soda and mine, even though mine will be smaller because you're under 1 million, right? Or under like 1.2 or wherever it switches over. It's really at 1 million where the difference is the biggest. You know, at 500,000, they should be really close together. But let's make that other plot. So what we want to do is create a new figure so that everything will go into this window. And how do we make this plot? We need to get the equilibrium value as a function of time, right? And the equilibrium value not as a function of time, as a function of our base experience rate, which is an input to our model, right? So that means we need to run, and so if I wanted to know for this input, the last time we ran the model, I can look at the actual rate versus time. And you can see, like, here it's 0, here it's 1, here it's 2, or that's 10,000, 20,000, 31, 20,500, or 20,000 21,000, 31,000, 41,500, 51,700, right? It keeps going up, so it's changing like crazy right back here. But if you go really far on this array, like towards the end of the time scale, you can see, look at all these, 1.3636, 1.3636, 1.3636. That's the equilibrium value. The rate has stopped. We've been leveling for so long now that the rate has stopped changing. And so what we can do then is we can just go into this actual rate versus EXP, or actual EXP rate versus time array that we spit back, and just pluck out the final value in here, and that will be the equilibrium rate for the given input that we added. So what we need is a wrapper script that runs our model over and over again for different values of base EXP gain, like unattenuated EXP gain. So we'll create a new file here. Soda EXP wrapper function. And what do I want to spit back from this? I want the base rate, so that'll be delta B, and the equilibrium rate, delta EQ. And what do we have to take in? Well, we can just say delta B min, delta B max, and that should be fine. Let's save this in my code, good, so that I don't lose it this time. I think I got booted out of Shroud again. Nope. It just hasn't changed music in a while. I gotta turn that down just a little bit. Alright, so we need a delta B step. And we're going to say that's equal to, let's take 100 steps, because 100 points gives you a pretty good plot. We might bump it up. Let's do 200 just to make sure we're really well there. Delta B max minus delta B min divided by 200, let's say. Now, I'm going to say current let's just write delta B current is equal to delta B min, while delta B current is less than delta B max. And then every step in the loop, we're going to have to increment delta B current at the end. Equals delta B current plus delta B step by our step, so that eventually we get bigger than delta max. So what do we got to do? We just got to run the model, right? Here's how we run the model. We've done it a bunch of times. We're going to be using my rate. So we'll keep 0 there. But instead of plugging in this for delta B, we're going to say, what was that 60? Oh yeah, that's without, because we're not taking a break, right? We're not studying breaks here. So 60 is, I've got 60 minutes on, 0 minutes off. And so we're going to say and it's let's put this on the next line so we can see what we've done there. Put a little comments in here, run the model. Increment our counter. Now we need to think about what these delta B and delta EQ are going to be. So delta B equals zeros, row column. We're making row vectors here. So this is zeros. I think it's 201. Let's. Then we'll just call index. We got to keep track of what index we're on. And we got to increment that. So we'll just say delta B at index is equal to delta B current. That'll get that, and then we need delta A, or delta EQ. So what's delta A going to be? I'm going to say len is equal to the length of this array, actual EXP rate versus time. That's how many elements are in there. And we want the final element for delta A store delta B store delta EQ. Actual EX, so delta EQ len, we want the, or sorry, delta EQ index is equal to actual EXP versus time at the final index. The very end of our array, we know that's when we're at equilibrium. For sure. As long as we go for long enough on our model, which we've done an entire day, so that should be plenty. Although, actually, I've seen with Shroud's way of doing the attenuation that it could even take longer than a day to really reach equilibrium. Like if we go back in the paper, where is it? Yeah, see these? I mean, the blue one at 5 million AXP an hour, you're still not, it's still wiggling out there at 2,000 minutes. So what's 2,000 divided by 60? Right, that's like 33 hours and change. And you're still wiggling, so you're still not really at equilibrium after 24 hours. And since our model runs so fast, let's pump that up to 36 hours. Okay. And I think that's all we want to store here in order to get this. And I don't want to call this soda wrapper because that's really not descriptive. So let's call this calculate EXP EQ rate versus EXP base rate. I think that's better. And then I'm going to go save as. And let's get rid of soda wrapper. Okay, cool. Oh, I hate. I haven't figured out how in MATLAB to change my background, but when I code in a in a compiled language, I always have a black background, so just staring at this white background is making me go crazy. Okay, I think this is going to get it. So let's go ahead and run this. What's our delta B min we want? What did I do on that plot? This one. 0 to 10 million. So that's 10 to the 7th. Man, look at how fast that is. That just ran our model, even though we extended it to 36 hours. It ran it 200 times. And we should have a new figure open. Yes. So let's do a plot. Delta B. Delta EQ. Not that exciting, but look, it looks very similar to what our previous rate was. So now what we got to do is change the formula so that we end up with the red line and not the purple line for our attenuation. Right? And we can do this really easy, right? So if this was 1 instead of EB, and that goes down to 0, then that's exactly what we need for M, for our multiplicative constant. So we can say M as a function of A for the red line is going to be the slope, y equals mx plus b, right? Well, the intercept is still 1. And the slope times A is what we need. So we need something times A plus 1. Just like we had for this one, negative 1/3 times A plus 1, right? Well, guess what we're going to get here? We're going to get, this is 1, or 0 minus 1, so negative, and then 4 over 4 minus 0. So it's just going to be negative 1 over 4 here for this line, right? To get the red line instead of the purple. The purple was 1 over 3. Negative 1 over 3a plus 1. Now we get negative 1 over 4a plus 1. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Let's just come in here to our model. We're going to replace this in my way. And anytime I replace a line, I always comment it out, copy it, put a new line underneath, and we're going to change this to 1/4. That's it. That's the only thing we have to do. You've just expanded, like, taking care of all of the experience in the entire game, giving everybody a big boost to experiencing the entire game when the expansion comes out. You just have to change that 3 to a 4. So you got it, man. Exactly. I mean, it's just so, right? Gravity says, so it's 1/3 or 1/4 could be 1 over episode plus 2, where episode equals episode number. You got it, man. I mean, look at that. I mean, it's just so beautiful. And let's see what happens to our curve here. So we need to rerun the model with that. We've saved it. Let's just do this. I'm going to do a hold on, and then we're going to plot this, but with red. See that? Boom. There's episode 3 right there. Here's episode 2. Grand unification theory of XP, awesome. Gravity, thank you for those 100 biddies, man. I appreciate it. I know, this is so awesome, isn't it? And by the way, just for reference, let's go ahead and put unattenuated in there. So what's unattenuated going to be? It's just plot delta B versus delta B, right? Because it never changes. And there you go. Boom. You can see that we're just going to keep march. And what we really want to do to, let's blow this up, make it look a lot better. And let's actually do one more. Let's do negative 1/5. Ooh. Let's do, I want to kind of reorder this plot. So I'm going to get rid of this because I'm anticipating what the legend is going to look like. So I want to redo this way. This is our original. But first thing I want to plot, so let's go ahead and calculate this. Okay, done. Now I'm going to plot delta B versus delta B. This is our unattenuated, and we're going to make that black. We should just get a straight line. Oh no, did it add it over here? It must have. Okay, we can, yeah, see data 1 there. Okay, let's just get rid of that. I can always, you can see how hard it is to make these plots, right? Once you got all this information in there, it's like piece of cake, just a plot, whatever you want. So there's the unattenuated line. The equilibrium rate is equal to the base rate because the base rate never changes. Then we're going to go ahead and plot but I want this to be blue. So this is the result for you know, the 1/3. Forgot to hold it, of course, so let's do that. Hold on, and blue. Boom, looks good. Now let's go ahead and calculate the red one, so we get rid of that. Oops. And let's do episode 3. Rerun the model a gazillion times. Takes no time at all. And then we'll come in here and we'll change this to red. All right. And then we'll change this to 5. Rerun the model. Make this plot, but make it cyan. And we'll change this to 6. Rerun the model. And we'll change it to magenta. Ooh. So look at what's happening. Something's borked here. There's a kink occurring. Whoa, that's really interesting. Oh. I know why that kink's happening, because I need to change this value accordingly for each. I need to change my limit because we're getting over 3 million an hour eventually, right? So it's just flooring it at 0 if you get over 3 million an hour. Okay, so let's redo this. So this was the original. We're going to run it. We're going to do this to show the unattenuated line. And we're going to do this to show what we got. And then now, in order to switch this to episode 3, this becomes 4. And then we need to make this 4. Because, see, our new line here is terminating at 4, right? And not at 3. And so anything over 4 million, we have to say you're done. You're done gaining. But you can still go up to 3. So that's saved. We'll rerun it. We'll do red. And then we'll change this to 5 and this to 5. Rerun it. Cyan. This goes to 6 and this goes to 6. Rerun it and magenta. Boom. And if we zoom in, blow it up, clean it up just a little bit. Oops. But you get the idea, right? Very, very easy to extend. Highly, when you're barely gaining any experience, then you're basically unattenuated. As you gain more and more, this is when you hit 1 million an hour base, right? So you're definitely attenuated before 1 million. But we have a much smoother curve for attenuation. And then I should also put the shroud, what I would like to do is put the shroud curve on here too. Right? And but the fact that we're bending down so much from this black line as our base rate increases shows that attenuation is working. But higher level characters are not going to, they unattenuated, they would be earning this rate of experience on the black line. Here they're earning much less. Right? Pretty cool, guys. So, I feel good about this. And what we've done, what was our goals again? I think we've met them all and added something to it. Communicator findings, easy to implement. And we'll add something in here. Easy to extend. So part 3 is what remains, right? So I'm going to save this as a video, upload all this to YouTube, and then I'm going to work on writing up these results because we've got everything here. Everything's done. We just need to write it and communicate it in a way that's clear and hope that Chris finds some time to actually read it and digest it and make a decision on whether this is good for the game or not, you know. And maybe it isn't, you know. I mean, I'm very limited on what they do, you know. On their view of the game is so much wider than mine, you know. And so I'm just hoping that this helps and shows that, hey, maybe there is a way to make a slight tweak to attenuation and also make it so that people just don't have to feel like they have to stop leveling for a while before they can make any more progress. So that's that. I'm super hungry, and I'm a little, I'm actually pumped to write this up. So, but I don't think that writing it on stream is going to be that worth doing. But certainly doing the development, talking about all the ideas, and I hope this has been informative for you guys. or for you, Gravity, and anyone else who's out there. So I'm gonna take a little break. I might play a little bit more Shroud. I might decide to just write this up instead. So if I absolutely, hey man, you've hung in there the whole time, Gravity. So I'm really proud of you, man. It's not like playing a video game, right? But hopefully it makes the experience of playing a video game better for everyone. So I might be back on, I don't know, and play some games, but I probably will be interested in writing this up now and getting it on the forums as soon as possible. So take a look at it. I'll probably do I'm a programmer. I dig math, so it was fun. Nice. Very nice. Awesome, man. Well, and hopefully you learned something about the inner workings of Shroud, right? Like under the hood, too. Because I'm just so happy that they've given us so much information about how this game works, because I'm always interested in how games work. And it's hard to find information about that stuff. So, but yeah, so I'll probably be writing tonight. Look for the forum post. And hope you enjoy the result. This has been the fun part. So now the real work begins, right? So anyway, everybody have fun. Take care. Mimner out. See you, bud.